Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. This is a place where I talk about books, and I have got lots of books to tell you about. So my brief personal news is on Wednesday when I was rowing, the club manager called me into the office after we had put the boat away and asked me if I was interested in being an assistant coach at the club. So I'm going to take some additional training, and yes, because for the past 2 years I have been volunteering with people who are learning to row. I just really enjoy the sport. So that is on the horizon. I'm going to start with bookish news. The Women's Prize for Fiction was just announced this past week, and I have read 4 of the books on the long list. 3 of them I think I have already talked about on this channel, but not this next one, which I read last year, but I'm still catching up since brain injury, still catching up on many books that I've read and haven't told you about. So, Moderation by Elaine Castillo. She is a queer Filipino-American writer, and her other 2 books that I have read are a work of 3 generations of a Philippine family that comes to the United States. That one is called America is Not the Heart. And then she also has a nonfiction book that I highly recommend, How to Read Now. I loved that. So this one is quite different, but just as smart. Like, she is one smart woman, you can tell this. Moderation is set in just slightly in the future. It's in Las Vegas. The central character is Girly Del Mundo, and she is a social media content moderator. So in the very early part of the book, I was reminded of that short novel by a Dutch writer, Hannah Bervoets, We Had to Remove This Post. However, this one goes off in a different direction, and there's a lot more about the people in Girly's life, including her young cousin who's a lesbian and wants to propose to her girlfriend. There's lots of family stuff going on, but Girly herself is a very closed off, tightly self-controlled person, and I love reading about characters like that. In Storygraph, one of the descriptors for this book is funny, and that's not a word that I would use. In the audio especially, which is what I listen to, and it's read by the author, she's got the character coming across as somebody with controlled rage, and you find out there's good reason for this anger. Her family has lost a lot in the financial crisis of 2008. There's misogyny, there's racism, and within a virtual world, that's where, here's Frida come to say hello. That's where Girly has been asked if she will use her talents there to be a content moderator kind of in live form, or, as it's happening. And there's virtual rape, there's all kinds of stuff going on in this virtual world, shenanigans. And it's totally believable that this is our future. This is a work of cultural commentary, and it's really well done. So I'm glad to see it on the Women's Prize list. And there's a book on that list that I had not heard of at all. It's called Kingfisher by Rosie Kelly, and it was in Hoopla. So I've checked it out. I'm already 28 pages in and I am hooked. So that's one of the things I am reading right now. Another long list was recently announced, and that's the International Booker Prize list. That's for translated work. And there was only one book on that list that I had almost read, and that is We Are Green and Trembling. It's by Gabriela Cabezon Camara. I had read one of her previous books, China Iran. I thought it was The Adventures of China Iran. I really liked it. However, when the ebook came in on hold for me from Libby, I was reading another ebook, and it was taking me a really long time to get through that ebook. I am going to be talking about it later on in this video. But it means that I did not get to We Are Green and Trembling, and it ended up going on to the next person. So even though I will read more than one book concurrently, I can only do one ebook at a time and one audiobook at a time. And then in print format, I will have different types. So I might have a nonfiction and a fiction and a poetry or a graphic novel, something like that. So there's a variety. Anyway, I'm back on the waiting list for We Are Green and Trembling, and now there's 6 or 7 people ahead of me, but of course there's plenty to read in the meantime. And some of the other books on that International Booker list are also very interesting to me, but I'm only going to tell you about one that I was able to check out and listen to the entire thing since this list was announced, and that is a Taiwan Travelogue. It's by Yang Shuang-Zi, and it was translated by Lin King, and the audiobook is read by Sarah Skaer. So Yang Shuang-Zi is a Taiwanese author, and her book, this book, won the National Book Award in the US, the translated version, but the original Mandarin version won the Taiwan's highest fiction award, the Golden Tripod, when it came out. And the story is set in 1938 Taiwan, and a young woman who is a Japanese novelist has been invited to Taiwan by the Japanese government. So Japan has occupied Taiwan at this time, and the woman who's been assigned to be her interpreter while she's there, the two women get to be friends. And so this growth in their relationship is central really to the novel, but also the power dynamics. So they come from different social and ethnic backgrounds, and this definitely has an effect. And the writer, it takes her a long time to figure out what is going on. So at first, the story seems kind of fluffy because the writer is so keen on food and trying the traditional Taiwanese specialties in the different areas. And it's food recipes, what this tastes like, what that tastes like. But as I said, there are layers underneath, so it is subtle and then becomes more and more evident as the story goes on. And I thought it was quietly brilliant. Yeah, I really liked it. These next two I am recommending for middle grade March, even though I read them a little while back. But this next one has got a lot about Chinese food in it. The Nine Moons. The Nine Moons of Han Yu and Luli, and it's by Karina Yan Glaser. And yeah, I listened to the audiobook of this one as well. And this one has got two storylines that alternate in two timelines. 731 Tang Dynasty China and 1931 Depression era Chinatown, Manhattan. So there are parallel and intersecting segments between the two timelines, and both of them feature 11-year-olds. So one is Han Yu, and he sells steam buns with his father at the market. Until there's a widespread lung disease. So he leaves the city of Chang'an and he travels a trade route, and he's in the company of the poet Du Fu. And I read about the poet Du Fu in Madeline Teen's Book of Records right around the same time as I was reading this one, Nine Moons of Han Yu and Luli. So yeah, one of those great serendipitous occasions. So Luli is the Depression era character who's in Manhattan. And she's been begging her mother for some new shoes, and her mother explains that they are saving money for the mortgage. They want to buy this building where they have a restaurant and residence above. So then later on, Luli ends up helping her family and also doing a lot to share Chinese culture with her classmates and friends. It's a combination of historical fiction, suspense, adventure, family life, friendship, and bravery. And this book is especially aimed at readers ages 8 to 12. But I do recommend it for adults as well. And the next book I want to tell you about is for the same age level. And oh yeah, both of these books have won Newbery Honor medals this year at the American Library Association Youth Media Awards that were announced in January. I'll include links in the show notes for the American Library Association announcement, the International Booker, and the Women's Prize long list. So you can find a bunch of stuff down there. So this next book has additional relevance because it is set in Iran, 1941. It's called The Teacher of Nomad Land, a World War II story, and it's by Danielle Nayeri. Danielle Nayeri also wrote Everything Sad is Untrue, which is a fictionalized memoir, which I loved. And Teacher of Nomad Land is also excellent. In World War II, Iran declared neutrality, but the Allies wanted to ensure that they would continue to have access to oil through the Persian Gulf, and also to keep it away from the Nazis. So Britain and Russia invaded Iran. So the two siblings in this novel, there's a 13-year-old boy and his 8-year-old sister. Their mother had already passed on, so they just had their father, who was a school teacher that worked with nomad peoples. And the British Army thought that he was a spy or a German soldier or something like that, and he was killed. So now these children are orphans, and it's what happens next for them. And as part of their adventures, they meet up with a Jewish boy who had been on a kinder transport evacuation from Poland. They didn't have an easy time getting along, these three of them, but they did figure it out and help each other all get to where they needed to go. Travel adventure during wartime, highly recommend. Now we're getting into the adult books. So this next book also is the aftermath of the migration of people during World War II. It's House of Day, House of Night by Olga Tokarczuk, translated from Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. Now, this book was originally published in 1998, and the English translation by Antonia Lloyd-Jones came out in 2002, and it just came out in 2025 in North America. And since Olga Tokarczuk won the Nobel Prize in 2019, I'm thinking maybe that's why they decided to bring this out. I'm not sure. I loved it. Another book that I'm just so happy to tell you about. So I have read a lot of Olga Tokarczuk's work. So my pleasure in reading this, I think, is not only because I think that her writing style is just perfect for me. I love the way she says things, but also because I could see ties to all these other books. So, for example, the books of Jacob, they have the religious sects in there. You'll find those in House of Day, House of Night. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. That novel is set in a little village, Polish village, right near the Czech border. So is this one. The central character is an old woman who likes to do astrological charts, and there are philosophical ideas about death. So those are the ties. And then in Empusium, there's folklore, there's lots about mushrooms. In the picture book, The Lost Soul, there's themes about finding a home, belonging. The book Flights is a kaleidoscopic novel that's told in fragments that when you bring them together, make a larger story. And that is exactly how House of Day, House of Night is put together. Here's a quote. It's a fragment town, a Silesian, Prussian, Czech, Austro-Hungarian, and Polish town. It's in southwest Poland. So this used to be a part of Germany. And then in 1945, the Allies agreed to move the Polish border westward. And so the German people in that town were displaced, and Polish people from the eastern edge, where Russia took over, were told, okay, there's houses that you can live in over here in Silesia. So the persona of the voice in the novel that you keep returning to is of a couple who have bought one of the houses in this area. And so the setting, the contemporary setting is the 1990s. But all of the people there have been affected by the history. And there's all these snippets of life and sometimes death of the people around there, but they're interspersed with folkloric elements and gathering mushrooms, recipes for mushrooms, the kind that you probably don't want to try at home. So here's an example of her style. The parasol is a mushroom that has no youth. It's already old when it emerges from the ground, looking like a white sheepskin hat. Everyone knows how to cook parasols. There's also the Saint Wilgefortz, who's a saint from German folklore who didn't want to have to marry the person that her father chose for her, so she begged for intervention from God and grew a beard. In this novel, there's a monk with gender dysphoria who is writing the life story of Saint Wilgefortz. So all kinds of things going on in that book. And if you haven't read anything at all by Olga Tokarczuk, I recommend starting with this one. You'll know if she's a writer for you if you enjoy this. Oh, she's definitely a writer for me. So, on the theme of resettlement is something that happened on a massive scale in India when the partition happened into Pakistan in 1947. And the sectarian unrest and violence has been going on ever since. In The Once and Future Riot by Jo Sacco, this is a nonfiction work of comics journalism. And Jo Sacco travels with Indian journalists to find out more about a particular riot that happened in Uttar Pradesh in 2013. Tens of thousands of people were displaced and scores of people died at that time. So he interviewed all kinds of people trying to understand what exactly happened, what led to neighbors killing each other, and what is the role of crowd violence in politics and especially in a democracy. This book is unsettling and powerful. There are race riots embedded right into the structure of this next book, which is a novel from Malaysia, The Age of Goodbyes by Li Zi Shu, and it was translated from Chinese by YZ Chin. So this is the ebook that took me a really long time to get through. I started it at the end of December, and it took me 2 months to read it, even though it's not that long. But there's a weird thing about this book. It starts at page 513, and that is a significant number because it's a date. May 13th, 1969 was the day that race riots broke out in Malaysia between the Malays and the Chinese after an election. So The Age of Goodbyes has 3 storylines, and it is quite a puzzle. It's confusing, but also very compelling. My favorite storyline is about the lives of Chinese who are living in a tin mining town. And this novel is supposedly written by somebody called Shuang-Zi. And so one of the storylines is sort of a metafictional thing about authorship and this particular writer. And then the third storyline is about a young man who was raised in a brothel. His mother was a sex worker, and he is really infatuated with Mana, who is a trans sex worker. So lots going on in there. And I picked it up because I was buddy reading a different book with Freddie, the sluggish reader, State of Emergency by Jeremy Tang. And actually, this book has a blurb from Jeremy Tang. He says it is a multidimensional hall of mirrors, which I think is quite apt. And the book also won the China Times Open Book Award. This author actually has won multiple prizes for her work that was published in Malaysia, in Taiwan, and Hong Kong. So I wouldn't say this is a book for everyone, but it is unique. So one of the characters in The Age of Goodbyes is a guy who's got an important role in a tong, and in that particular tong is one that has some criminal activity. Now, this next book is a work of history. It's Chinatown, Vancouver, an illustrated history. It's by Donna Cito, and the author is a Vancouverite. She's an artist and academic as well. And during the COVID pandemic, she started painting the buildings in Vancouver's Chinatown. And in this book, you see these paintings, you see archival photographs, and lots of history, the background for these different buildings and the people who were instrumental in the Chinatown community starting back in the mid-1800s when Chinese people first started emigrating to Canada and the US, first for the gold rush and then later for working on the railroad in Canada. And they faced so many challenges, so many racist laws against them. So, for example, having to pay a head tax because they were Chinese in order to land in Canada. It started out being $10 a head. It went up to $100 a head and then $500 a head until in 1923, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed and no Chinese immigration was allowed at all. And that wasn't lifted until 1947. As a result of Canada signing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So for a long stretch of time, there were a lot of Chinese men who either their wives and children were back in China or they were bachelors, and there were anti-miscegenation laws as well. There were anti-Asian race riots in Vancouver in 1907, targeting both Chinese and Japanese immigrants. There were stories, some of these Chinese immigrants came alone as 9-year-olds with paperwork that said they were 16, and they had to work to pay off the $500 head tax that relatives had paid for them. That was something that took 2 years of work or more to pay off that amount of money. And there were, and still are, clan associations or tongs that have assistance, social assistance, helping keep culture alive as well. And in this book, there's so much about Chinese food. like the kind of dishes to expect at dim sum, what kind of things you get at a Chinese bakery, just all kinds of fascinating information, things that I learned, like Chinese restaurants couldn't get a liquor license because in order to get a license in British Columbia, you had to be on the voter rolls, and until 1947, Chinese Canadians couldn't vote. So much documented discrimination, but even things like architectural details. So now I know, and when I go to Chinatown here in Victoria, I can recognize typical features like recessed balconies and mezzanine floors that are typical of Western Canada, Chinatown building construction. So much interesting stuff in that book. Oh, and a beverage. Yuan Yuan is one name for it. I think it's got other names as well, and it's a Hong Kong beverage that's a mixture of coffee and tea. I can't imagine it. If you've had this before, let me know in the comments. All right, one more book, as I'm losing the light. This one has got Trinidadian foods in it, like pulore and doubles and aloo pie and kalaloo. Saga Boy, My Life of Blackness and Becoming, and it's by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. The audiobook is read by the author. This was Jolene of Bookworm Adventure Girl's favorite nonfiction in 2025. So that's one of the reasons why I picked it up. But also, Antonia Lloyd-Jones is the host of CBC's The Next Chapter, a radio program for readers that I enjoy very much. And he's got such an interesting story. He was raised by his grandmother in a little tiny town in Trinidad that had just one road, that small. And when he was 11, his grandmother died. So he and his older brother ended up coming to Canada to live with an aunt in the far north of Ontario, a tiny little place called Wabigon. And he and his brother were the only Black kids there. Eventually, they lived in larger places in Canada. And their father was here in Canada. Kind of a bad news sort of guy, but you get to know all of that through this memoir. Antonia Lloyd-Jones is also a musician, and he's had several incarnations of musical performer, and he sings on this audiobook, so that's another bonus. But there is so much vivid sensory experience in here, and some really difficult times for him as well. It's certainly not all sweetness and light, and it is excellent. And that's all I've got for you today. So I want to thank you so very much for listening. And I always appreciate hearing from you. So please do say hello in the comments down below. And let me know if you've read any of these, or if you want to pick any of these up. Let me know what you're reading. Let me know what's good. Until the next time, happy reading, everybody. Bye for now.